Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today's review is arguably a long-awaited one, and that is of the Denafrips Aries 12th Anniversary Edition. Fully balanced resistor ladder, or R2R, digital to analog converter. At current exchange rates, it is being listed at just a tick over 1,000 US dollars from Vinshine's website, which I will link to down below. This was sent to me by Alvin Chee of Denafrips, and for review, he has asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation and the ability to share this review when it goes public. Right? But he has made no attempt to influence my opinion on this piece in one way or the other, and he has been very helpful and prompt in answering any and all technical questions I've had about his products. So thanks to Alvin, he's been a joy to work with, and again, very low pressure and hands-off in terms of my reviewing here, and just a generally good guy to work with. To my knowledge, I will not be keeping this DAC as well, so it will be going back to Alvin or on to the next reviewer, whatever the case may be, here very soon. So let's dive into shameless self-promotion, and then on the other side, I will talk more about the Denafrips Aries 12th Anniversary Edition Digital to Analog Converter. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. Let me take just a moment to briefly explain the pricing on this unit, because I mentioned in the intro there that this is just a tick over 1,000 US dollars. So Denafrips / Vinshine is based in Singapore right now, at least their offices and headquarters are, that's my understanding. And this is listed in Singapore dollars on that website, and then they do a conversion to US dollars or euro if you're in Europe and all that. And at least the conversion right now to US dollars lands this as of the morning of May 9th, 2023 at $1,018.03. Right, so that's what I mean by just a tick over. Now, I have seen that wobble a few cents up and down. Like, I've seen it around $1,017.43, something like that. And so it wobbles up and down a little bit based on whatever the current exchange rate is. But call it essentially a 1,000 USD DAC. All right. Another thing that I want to talk about here is just, I was curious about this, so I will share it with you. It's like, why a 12th anniversary edition instead of, say, a 10th anniversary or 15th or whatever the case may be? And that's because Denafrips is a Chinese company, and they base a lot of their culture and all that around the zodiac, right? And so there are 12 zodiac signs, and so the 12th anniversary edition here means basically they've come one complete zodiac cycle in the existence of Denafrips. So that's the meaning behind the 12th anniversary edition, and that's why we're getting, you know, these pieces here, because Denafrips has been around for 12 years now. So congratulations to Alvin and Denafrips for making it this far. Not everyone does, so okay, round of applause to you. All right. Now, as far as features and all of that goes here, this DAC boasts a balanced R2R design. It is fully balanced. It does its digital to analog conversion using a resistor ladder, which is why we often hear it called R2R. So there are two separate resistor ladders in here because of the balanced nature. Okay, one resistor ladder per channel. Now, it will decode up to 32-bit 1536 kilohertz sampling rate PCM files via the USB input. It specifies in the owner's manual that all of the other inputs top out at 24-bit 192 kilohertz PCM files. If you use the USB input, it will also decode up to DSD 1024 if that is of interest to you. Now, in the past, I have scoffed a little bit about having DACs that go up to 768 kilohertz or 1536 kilohertz sampling rates, just thinking you don't really need to go that high, but I did find an advantage to the existence of that option with this DAC, which I will unpack here in a moment. Okay, so with those basics here about what this DAC is and the pricing and all of that, let me kind of share up front here what some of my main takeaways are of this, and then you can use the timestamps to navigate around through this video and watch the parts that you want to watch or that are most relevant or helpful to you. And those are, one, this is really an excellent DAC. I'm very excited about this product. I think that what happened here and some of the improvements made in this unit over previous generations, which I did a written review of the Aries 2 3 years ago now, something like that, which I can link to down below. But some of the areas where that one had some relative weaknesses were successfully addressed here in the 12th anniversary edition. And I think that bodes well for Denafrips and Denafrips' future. So we'll unpack some of that in here. And I think that for the right user, this can really be a high value product, even at $1,000 US. And I will explain that as we go here too. But otherwise, it is well built. It has a very nice feature set, minus the ability to use it simultaneously as balanced and single-ended, using both the balanced and single-ended outputs. Okay, again, not a good idea on this DAC to do that, and I'll explain that here too. But it stacks up really well with the competition and all of that, and I think it's really an excellent product that I am excited about. I will be disappointed when it leaves here very soon. Okay, because I did enjoy it, and I think that for the right user, this is a really excellent product that can be a really high value product as well. So, look in the timestamps for info on all of that, navigate around on the video as we go. So, we will dive in then to features and build and all of that sort of thing. So, here's the front panel, rather Spartan looking. We do have direct access buttons for all of the inputs, which is a new thing on Denafrips models. So you used to have to cycle through inputs. This one, it allows you to select directly, which is nice. We have the ability to toggle between oversampling and non-oversampling modes. Now, previous versions of the Aries were, one of the comments about them is they weren't true non-oversampling when you engage the non-oversampling or NOS mode. This one, the Denafrips website claims is a true NOS mode, and there are some sonic benefits and all of that here to that, which I will get to in a moment. You get a phase button, you get a mute button, and all of that. Then we have the kind of standard Denafrips way of showing sampling rates where we have tiny red LEDs that light up. So if you're running a 16-bit, or just not even 16-bit, but a 44.1 kilohertz PCM file, then this light right here above 44.1 will light up. If you're doing an 88.2 kilohertz file, then the 44.1 will light up as like the base number, and then this 2x multiplier light will light up to show you that you are playing back an 88.2 kilohertz sampling rate file. Okay, it works the same way with just the base lighting up, and then the multiplier does that for PCM and DSD there for all of the different decoding options. Okay, the unit here is solid. Like, there is some heft to it. We have aluminum construction everywhere that is well done. It's, I mean, again, it's a very, basic industrial looking unit, but it is solid. It is well made. Let's look at the back panel. Here we see the balanced XLR outputs. We do have a single-ended RCA stereo pair of outputs here. Okay, again, you need to choose which one of these to use. You don't want to run them simultaneously. That puts an extra load and strain on the output stage here, which does affect sound quality. So do choose one or the other, and honestly choose balanced, okay? You want to buy this DAC to use in a balanced system, or at least have a balanced connection between this and your preamp or amplifier. All right, then we have two flavors of SPDIF input, digital input. We have the Toslink optical, we have RCA coax. We get an I2S input where this unit is configurable to multiple different pinouts for I2S. So it will be compatible with most devices out there that have an I2S output. So there's not a standard I2S protocol, unfortunately, but this unit comes with a lot of flexibility to match to it. And then we have the USB input. And I am excited about this USB input because the quality of the USB implementation on this unit is a dramatic improvement from previous Denafrips models. It's a dramatic improvement from the Aries 2. It's a dramatic improvement from the Pontus 2 and all of that. So I will get into that in a little bit here. And that opens the door to some listening options that weren't realistic with the previous models because their USB input just frankly wasn't all that great. Okay, but much better here. Good job to Alvin and Denafrips for figuring that out here in the 12th anniversary edition. Okay, so we can transition to sound a little bit here, and let me get a couple of things out of the way here first. I primarily used the balanced output. I did check the single-ended output. It is okay. It is not nearly as strong a performer from its single-ended output as it is from its balanced output. I think you do want to use this as a balanced DAC because it is designed and built around being balanced. It should not be surprising that it sounds better being used that way. Okay, the single-ended output again isn't terrible, but it is just it's softer. The spatial presentation isn't quite as coherent or as well separated. The resolution takes a slight hit, and the dynamics and all of that take a slight hit too. It's just overall just a little bit not quite as clean, not quite as clear, not quite as distinct. It's a little bit mushier, okay, overall in comparison to the balanced output. And again, because of the construction of this, these are unbuffered outputs. You don't want to run balanced or single-ended at the same time. That to me is the biggest ergonomic and usage drawback of this unit, is that gap between the balanced and single-ended output performance. Okay, now that is not at all unique to the Aries 12th edition. DACs from this price range and lower, and even some that are much more expensive, like that are designed and built to be balanced, they do sound better from their balanced outputs and take a performance hit from the single-ended output. So I'm not singling out Denafrips here in their design or their execution. I'm just saying that that is a factor. That is true of this DAC. That is true of a great many. So if you need a high-quality single-ended output of a DAC in this price range, you probably want to look elsewhere. Okay, or be willing to spend some money, okay, not ridiculous amount, but into the hundreds for quality balanced to single-ended conversion. So just beware that that is a thing. Okay. As far as test gear goes, I tried a variety of configurations to try to get to the ins and outs of what this thing can do. So I did direct USB connection to my Windows 10 desktop PC, and also a direct USB connection to my Microsoft Surface Pro 4 laptop/tablet, which is also a Windows 10 based machine. Okay, I also put my Singer SU2 DDC in between there and tried both the I2S and the coaxial input on this thing. This was connected via direct Toast-Link to my desktop PC from the Toast-Link digital output on the motherboard of that, just for like system sounds and all of that sort of thing. I also connected this via I2S from Denafrips' own Iris DDC and all of that, so that made it in here too. And then downstream from and then software sourcing was primarily Rune, okay, either connected via direct USB or through one of those DDCs connected direct USB into my PC, okay, or I would connect those to those would be connected to, like I recently got in a Sonor Ultra Rendu streamer. The iFi Neo Stream made it in there sometimes and all of that, so those would have been, the Ultra Rendu would have gone through the SU2 and then some flavor of digital output into this. The Neo Stream has a plethora of digital outputs that I would put into this too, mostly I2S on this one, just because of the reputation Denafrips has for being quality from I2S. So there was a lot going on in there and a lot to check out just on the source end. Then downstream from that, the amplifiers that I tried on here would be mostly my Vioelectric HPA V281 amp connected via balanced. I did try briefly the iFi Pro iCan Signature Edition connected via balanced again. And then for single-ended output, I checked it with the HPA V281 again, and then also I have an LTA MZ3 in for review, and so I tried that single-ended connection as well to try to do the comparison between balanced and single-ended. Okay, headphones mostly for the critical listening. The trio of Susvara, Original Utopia, and HE1000 SE far and away got the most time on here. This did spend a little bit of time being the DAC for my desktop speaker system, which would have been mostly routed through the balanced input of my V281 using its single-ended preamp outputs into a Parasound Zamp V3 amplifier to Yamo C93 Mark II speakers on my desk, and then the LTA Z10E also driving those same speakers there as the speaker amp in there as well. So I tried a bunch of stuff, and I know that was a long list, but I want to get it out there that I really tried to do a deep dive on a lot of these different features in here so I could really get a sense for who is this product for and who is going to get the most value out of it. All right. So again, most of my listening then and all of these comments that I'm about to make about sound are coming from the balanced output of this thing. All right, now, the sound signature from a perceived frequency response standpoint is, I'm going to call it par for the new course here of Denafrips. So previous Denafrips models, like the Aries 2, like the OG Pontus 2, and all that, at least that I have heard, they tended towards warmth. They were a very large sound staging with quite holographic spatial presentation, but they had a very warm signature to them. There was an emphasis on like the mid-bass region with a slight roll-off in the top end that just gave them that very kind of warm sound signature. They still came with a lot of clarity and all of that. Now, the Pontus 2 that I reviewed recently with the 12th anniversary edition FPGA, is that right? Yes, FPGA firmware update made a shift from that warmer signature to a much more neutral, still just slightly warm kind of signature. The same kind of thing happened here. Moving from the older Aries 2 to this, the Aries 12th anniversary edition, we went from warm to a much more neutral perceived frequency response presentation with just a hint and flavor of warmth in there, but still where it's just more neutral than it isn't. So a definite move towards neutrality from a perceived frequency response. However, it did maintain and very likely improved upon just that large and very large soundstage with very accurate imaging and separation in there. And for a product of this price, is particularly adept at doing the depth dimension with nice layers to the sound in there in that depth dimension. So this is still one of the best staging and best spatial presentation DACs that I have heard anywhere near this price right here. It's just very, very good at that trait. Now, the Aries 2, the original Aries 2, did not strike me as being particularly macro dynamic or impactful. It had an energetic and lively presentation to it. At least in comparison to like the original Bifrost 2, for example. And in how I think this stacks up here, like it's still somewhat energetic and lively, but maybe not quite as the Aries 2 was. But I do think it brings just a little bit more, particularly low-end impact to it. It's not going to be a huge slammer. Okay, it's not going to be super aggressive in that that trait. But I think the overall dynamics and physicality took just a small step forward in this generation over previous ones as well. Now, the resolution here is also pretty good. You're getting pretty good room reverbs, and what I like about that is, like, and particularly with the depth of the staging, is you can hear a sound and you can hear like reflections off a back wall kind of thing with a clear and distinct separation between the source of the sound and the reflection of the sound, and the reflection of the sound having a lot of clarity and definition to it. Okay, coming in. So as far as resolution and other subtle things like texturing and all of that that are indicators of resolution, this is one of the most resolving DACs around $1,000 that I have heard as well. So another positive trait there. So I mean, overall, I really enjoyed the sound of this thing on its own from the balanced output. I think it's a really strong performer. Okay, and this is using basically any of the digital inputs here with everyday sort of sampling rates. Okay, so we're talking like 44.1, 48, 88.2, 96, 192 kilohertz kind of PCM files. Okay, all of those traits there are pretty good. Jumping in here real quick after the fact, I need to make a quick comment on oversampling versus non-oversampling here while we're on the subject of the everyday, like up to 192 kilohertz sampling rates. Here at these levels, the non-oversampling versus oversampling modes of the Aries 12th edition don't make a huge difference. I have a slight preference personally for the NOS mode. But the gap here is quite small. The oversampling mode was just a little bit softer and didn't quite deliver the presentation, the spatial presentation in the depth as clearly to me as the non-oversampling mode did. But again, this is a very tight gap. This stands in contrast to the Aries 2 when I listened to it previously, where the non-oversampling mode was just clearly superior, basically regardless of sampling rate and all of that. So Alvin has done a good job of improving his digital filtering. Hasn't quite fully caught NOS yet, but is doing a better job with that. So someday I think he will probably come up with some pretty good digital filters to use for these more everyday, like up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz sampling rate files and listening. Now I'm going to get to the higher sampling rates here in just a moment from the improved USB implementation here. But before I do that, I want to talk about where this unit stacks up in the DAC market right now, based on just its performance from those more common everyday, what you'll get from bit perfect output kinds of players, before we dive into that anyway, okay? So, like for example, I have here the Gishelli Labs J2S DAC, which I got in pretty recently with the upgraded Sparkos op amps that comes with, that Gishelli is offering on their website. And I have a first impressions video of this out there, full review pending, and I will link to that down below. With the Sparkos op amp upgrade on all of both the single-ended and balanced outputs here, this one and the wooden case, it's coming in just shy of 600 USD. So there's a $400 price difference between the two. And there are some sonic differences. The J2S sounds pretty incredible there, but the Aries 2 is definitely ahead of it. I think its staging is a little bit bigger and a little bit clearer and more distinct yet. And there's more depth to it. And I think it's just a hair more resolving. The J2S sounds pretty good in comparison, but the Aries 12th here is its superior sonically to my ear. I have here the Socris DAC 1421, also an R2R DAC, but only single-ended. And I think this one is around 750 euro, which I don't know the exact exchange rate pricing on it right now, but that's just to give you a ballpark for where that stacks up to this one here price-wise. And these two actually sound pretty similar. Similar kinds of perceived frequency response, similar in the way they stage, similar in their dynamics and physicality, and so forth. They are not identical in their sound. They both do a really good job in the dimension, in the depth dimension. I think the DAC 1421 here is a little bit more subdued, not quite as active and lively sounding as the Aries 12th is and all of that. And I haven't had as much time with it. It may not be quite as purely resolving as the Aries is yet, but if you need a single-ended output, okay, this is definitely the better option over the Aries 12th because it's only single-ended. It is made single-ended. The quality you get single-ended versus single-ended is clearly in favor of the DAC 1421 here. And it will also handle some higher sampling rates, which may or may not be of interest to you. And I'll explain why here in a moment. And then the last one that I want to pull out here for just a quick comparison here, again, at the everyday, you know, up to 24-bit, 192 kilohertz PCM files and all that would be the shit Bifrost 2/64, which to me, the Bifrost has been, you know, again, kind of that upper mid-fi, lower hi-fi kind of standard bearer at $800. It's just been the best DAC that I've heard, you know, in like that $500 to $1,000 range, okay? Until this one came along. They do not sound the same, again, but these two really are sonically, roughly, technical equals. Maybe not even roughly. They are technical equals in terms of sound quality at those, just call them everyday normal sampling rates. Okay, and this also helped me determine that the USB implementation on the Aries is vastly improved because it is right there now with Shit's Unison USB implementation, which has been the class leader, in my opinion, at this price point. Up until this point, Alvin and Denafrips have gotten this unit to be right there, and I mean right there with the Bifrost and that Unison USB implementation via USB on its own. And that opened the doors for me to check the higher sampling rates, which I will report on here in just a moment. But just real quick between these two, the Bifrost 2/64, I still slightly prefer Shit's take on timbre. I just think that that is one of the strengths of their house sound, is just making voices sound like voices, instruments sound like the real thing, and that sort of thing, okay? But the Aries 12th is very close behind it now. Like, there is not a very big gap there in terms of timbre. In terms of soundstage size, these two are quite similar. The Aries might be just a little bit wider and deeper, okay, but not enormously so. The Bifrost 2/64 here is pushed a little bit closer to me. Like the distance from my head to where like the first row of sound is happening is a little bit closer. And so it comes across as being just a little bit more wall of sound, I think, because of that. And you kind of have to hear through that to hear that it does have good depth and layering. It's just not as readily noticeable as this, where this one, it stands out immediately that we've got a good sense of depth and layering going on here. Okay, now I think the Bifrost is also a little bit more active and energetic now, where the Aries 12th is, you know, not dull by any means, but just a little bit more laid back in its presentation. But again, in terms of sonics at everyday sampling rates, these two are basically all around equals. They just have slightly different presentations to their sound and all that. So if all you are interested in is like PCM files up to 24-bit, 192 kilohertz, and you don't need all of the fancy inputs and all of that, it's just going to be pick the one here that you think sounds better and has the sound profile of most interest to you. Okay, but I will say that in just terms of pure sound, and if you can handle that stripped down feature set, the Aries is not $200 sonically better than the Bifrost 2 is. They are just dead even, really, on the total technical package. You do get more features here with the Aries 12, save that it is perfectly safe to use both the balanced and single-ended outputs of the Bifrost simultaneously, and the gap between its balanced and single-ended performance is not zero, but it is significantly smaller than the gap between the single-ended and balanced output performance here on the Aries. So that would be the one ergonomic advantage that the Bifrost 2 brings that this one doesn't. But if you need the decoding options, DSD, okay, the other input options like I2S and all of that, then, okay, Aries 12. Now, let me come back around to that, what I'm talking about here with the higher sampling rates that this will accept via USB and the higher quality of USB implementation on the 12th edition as compared to previous generations of Denafrips DACs. When I heard that this was essentially a dead heat in overall quality from the USB inputs between the Aries and the Bifrost 2/64, I was like, okay, you know what? I am going to download the trial version of HQPlayer and try this oversampling thing. And I'm glad that I did, because I installed HQPlayer, okay, the trial version on my Microsoft Surface Pro 4 laptop, and ran it direct USB into the Aries 12th edition here with a AudioQuest Forest USB cable, and pumped the sampling rate, tried both 768 kilohertz output locked at 24 bits and 1536 kilohertz, again locked at 24-bit output from the Surface Pro 4 using HQPlayer. And I didn't do that for super long. This was more of a proof of concept test here, but I was hearing differences. The sonic background to my ear dropped even lower using that combination than when I was going from my Ultra Rendu from through the Singer SU2 DDC using Rune, which bypasses a computer altogether, okay, at least in terms of the audio signal chain, and is only controlled remotely by a computer app, okay. But the sonic background from that direct USB connection there to the Surface Pro 4 laptop was lower than even that combination, which stunned me a bit. That is not a result that I anticipated, and so that really got my attention that there might be something here, because that didn't make any sense to me. It shouldn't have been quieter, but it was. Okay, in addition to that, cymbal sounds sounded like they were much more in control and much more natural in their tonality and in their timbre, and just sounding a bit more real and more well resolved, and just like those subtle details like room reverbs and all that. I think the lower sonic background helps here. Just sounded a little bit more distinct, and they lived just a little bit longer. Like they trailed out just a little bit longer there using that combination. Once again, jumping in after the fact again, we need to talk quickly about NOS versus Oz again here for these really high sampling rates from HQPlayer. All right, and so what we're getting at here is that, like, with these really high sampling rates, when you start getting into 384 kilohertz, 768 kilohertz, 1536 kilohertz, which the Aries 12th can handle with a plumb, you basically have to use the non-oversampling mode. The digital filters are really not made to handle these really high sampling rates, and NOS is intended to be used with high quality external digital filters and all of that, and just not mess with them. So that's really what you want to use here is NOS if you're going to try HQPlayer or another upsampler and use the really high sampling rates here on the Aries 12th. Okay, so what does that mean? If you are looking for an upper mid-fi / lower hi-fi balanced DAC that can handle those really high sampling rates because you like to use HQPlayer, then this DAC represents a pretty compelling value. The USB implementation in here has improved to the point where it is highly viable just on its own and for those really high sampling rates from HQPlayer as an example, which means you don't have to spend extra money on a DDC for this unit or anything like that, so you can take advantage of such things. And if that applies to you, if you are in that category, then at $1,000 USD, this product can be a really high value proposition for you. Really high value. Okay. Outside of that, it's just an excellent upper mid-fi, lower hi-fi kind of DAC. Sounds really good. I have not heard a DAC in the $500 to $1,000 range fully catch and be an equal to the sound of the shit Bifrost 2/64 until this one came along. Everything else has gotten close, but fallen a bit short. This one truly equaled it, and then comes with some options that I think make the $200 price difference, okay, worth it for many users. All right, so I will again say thank you to Alvin Chee of Denafrips for having this sent here. I really enjoyed listening to it. I think it's a really rock solid product. If it was able to stay around so that I could play around with HQPlayer more and get that higher sampling rate stuff going, that would be cool. Most of the DACs that I own, like my Berkeley Alpha Series 2, the shit Bifrost 2 and all of that, they top out at 192 kilohertz PCM files. So HQPlayer doesn't really make sense for me for personal use, but I would enjoy playing around with it some with a DAC like this. Okay. But that also means that, Alvin, if you hear this, I am highly interested in checking out your 12th anniversary editions of your other DACs, like the Pontus, Venus, and Terminator series. Okay, so I'll just float that one out there for you too, because you did a really good job with this one. And Alvin's customer service, at least if his dealings with me have been any indicator, is outstanding. The fact that he offered the 12th anniversary firmware updates for his existing products was a really stand-up move, which he did a lot of work for, and then he didn't charge for it. And so that was just really great customer care and building brand loyalty. So he should be commended on that. But again, 12th anniversary edition of the Aries, excellent, easy to recommend. Okay, if its feature set and its pricing and all of that makes sense for you and you can use it balanced in your system. All right, I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Denafrips Aries 12th Anniversary Edition R2R DAC. Please like this video if you haven't yet. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. Please check out my PayPal and Patreon so you can see how to support the channel. Leave a comment below and all that sort of thing. And as always, thanks for watching and enjoy the music.